To work on the front support for the locomotive, we're going to need one of the templates, and these templates are included with the cutting guide. And the one that we need is this front support here. And so I just copied this template and carefully cut it out. You can see it has a measurement of 6 inches here, so you can make sure that your copy is at the correct dimension. Now I just thought I would show you how I cut these out, and the template from this part here, this width, is a 1/16 less than 3/4 of an inch, or that is 11/16. So I just use my ruler and draw an 11/16 inch line to begin with. And that just kind of helps me keep everything straight. And then I can turn it and take my template, and it should line up, these lines should line up. You'll see a little peek through the line right here at the top. And then I just carefully hold it down and mark these angles on the top and these curved pieces that come out of the two sides. And then once I have that traced, my procedure usually is to cut this big curve, then cut the two small curves, come back and cut these two lines, and then use my ruler, lining it up again at 11/16, and cut these two lines. Now in the cutting guide I said we would use a piece that is 6 by 8 for this. You can see I've got 4 of my pieces already cut. I just find it easier to work and have a bigger piece to hold on to. You could even leave it 6 by 12 just so you have something longer to work on. But and then the other thing I do is that wherever I've drawn, I label that front, just in case when you cut this you have some variation between left and right. This way when we line them all up, they'll all line up the same way and stack right up on top of each other. So that's how to use the template to cut this front support piece. We use that 6 times. So I've gathered all the pieces that we need for the front support here. Here are the pieces I just cut out, the 6 of the front, back, and middle. I've glued them together into doubles. Then I have 2 bases, 2 of my slant sides, 2 outsides. I have 1 piece that we will measure and cut the tops of the sides from. And then over here I have just some scraps of the scored lightweight chipboard that I had left over from making the boiler. And these are cut 1.5 inches wide, and we'll cut them to length as we build this. So let's get started. We'll work with one of our bases, and you'll notice that the base is a little bit shorter than the distance between this long flat edge of the support piece. And that is on purpose, so just center the base in between there. And before we start building this, let's just make an alignment line. This piece is 1.5 inches wide. It doesn't have to be exactly in the center, but we'll want to keep the middle one straight. So first what we'll do is just glue those 3 pieces on. Try to keep them straight. I just like to work from the front to the back, and I'm keeping my place where I wrote front aligned. And then once I have this initial glue up done, I'll let that dry, or at least set up before I move on. So now my glue has set up enough so that I can work. And the next piece I want to add is my slant sides. And those go right here along this part that's slanted. And we'll just put some glue and then add that piece. And repeat that on the other side and let that set up for a minute. And then once those slant sides are set, we can add the outside pieces, and they go on these far ends. They should be flush with the top. And I'll repeat that on the other side and let that set up for a few minutes. And then once these little sides have set, we're going to take this long piece that we cut to use for the side tops and put it right on here, get it tied up against the slant side, and then flip it over and mark and cut it to length. And once I have it cut to length, I'll go ahead and glue it in place here so that we have a nice square edge along here. And you can use the leftover piece to repeat for this other side. So that takes care of the medium weight chipboard, and now we're ready to cover these curved sections. So I've got a piece here. Let's see. Well, it's not quite 5 inches long. It won't take that much. I'm just putting it in this top curve and holding it down tight there. And then I can measure it to length and cut that off and go ahead and glue that on. And now that I have this top in place, I'll go ahead and use these little scraps here to fill in and do the same thing here on the bottom sides. So just measure and cut these pieces to length and go ahead and glue them on. So here's our support piece glued up, and I'm just going to let it set up for a few minutes and dry. Next, we want to check to see if we have the proper height for our support piece. And you'll do this with the Locomotive sitting flat on the table and the bogey sitting underneath the front here, and then this support piece will slip in. It comes right up against the trim, but not on top of the trim. So I'm going to turn this up just to show you what I'm going to be looking for, but you would have to do this in the proper flat position. So what we'll do when we slip this in is see if the Locomotive stays flush, or if there's any gap here between the support and the bogey base. You may want to slip this extra base in there and see how that fits. Watch that the Locomotive doesn't start popping up when you put something in. Now we will have a little thickness of paper when we wrap both the top and the bottom, so don't get this too tight in there. It may be that this extra piece of medium weight chipboard you think is too much, but you need something. So then cut a base out of lightweight chipboard and try that. Or if you only need a smaller shim, cut a piece out of cardstock and use that. It's kind of hard to say just exactly how much you will need, so just kind of check that height and see how things are. So when I checked my height, I determined I needed a piece of medium weight chipboard. So this is my second piece of base. And I'll just attach that even with the first base that I have on there. And I'll let that set up. So now my front support is set up and I'm ready to cover it with pattern paper. I've cut a piece here that is 7 inches long by 2 3/8 wide, and I've backed it totally with score tape. And the curved part is the top, so if you're using directional paper, make sure you get it put on the right way. And then just get it centered in here. Those measurements allow for about a 1/2 inch on all sides. So I'm going to stick it down and then trim the excess back to about a 1/2 inch or so, and then just wrap all the edges neatly, making some little cuts where I need to make cuts. So I'll get that done. So I've got my front and back wrapped, and then to do this part, we don't need to cover up this curve or this bottom curve at all. So I've just cut a piece that's just shy of 1.5 inches wide, and it's 4 inches long, and that'll allow me to start up here on the top about a 1/2 inch, maybe just slightly shy of a 1/2 inch, and then I can come and wrap around. So I'll get that done. So there's our front support piece. We may add some trim to it, but I think I'll wait to see what I want to do until I get the cylinders and the box that goes up on the top sides in place, and see if I think it needs trim at that point. On either side of the front support there is a wedge shaped structure that I'm calling a bogey top, and so we're going to make 2 of those bogey tops, and I have the pieces laid out here. They each have a base, a top, a back, and then for the sides I've subcut a rectangle into 2 triangles. Now they're basically made both the same, except for in the back one I'm going to have a couple of pipes coming out of that, so we need to cut some slots for that. Now if you don't want to have pipes, you can just make both of these exactly the same. To measure for these 2 cutouts, if you're going to have pipes, on one end draw an 1/8 of an inch line in from the edge, because these little rectangular cutouts won't go all the way to the top. And then with a centering ruler placed in the center, we want to leave 1.5 inches in between them, so measure out 3/4 of an inch from center for the first lines, and then these slots are 1/2 inch wide, so then 1/2 inch further. So we'll end up with a 1/2 inch space on either end, then the 1/2 inch slots, and then 1.5 inches in the center. And these slots go all the way to the end. Now this top may get to be a little fragile. The world won't come to an end if it does bend or break. We can deal with that. So I'll get my pieces cut, and then I'll be back to put things together. So I have my 2 notches cut out here, and I have reserved those cutouts because we will need them. I'm just going to put those pieces to the side for a moment and build this one that does not have the cutouts. So we'll start with the base, and it's basically a box construction. The only difference is that instead of having 6 sides, it only has 5 sides because it's a wedge shaped. So the back has been sized to fit in between the 2 sides, so we can put our sides on first. Then the back piece fits in between, and then another piece, side piece, goes on, so that we're creating this kind of a situation. Make sure everything is nice and square. And then the top piece will fit just on top there, and it will, when it comes down, it will overhang in the front there. Hopefully you can see that little bit where it overhangs there, so that it creates more of the triangular shape. So that when I have the glue, I've come right kind of on the corner here on the front, and then I can just put this piece on. It lines up square with the back edge and should come and down to your work surface here in the front. So we've created kind of a little wedge shaped box. So the bogey top with the cutouts goes together the same way. You can see I've already started laying the glue out there, but I do want to, before I put it together, just go ahead and ink around these openings, because once it gets together, it's a little bit tricky to get in there to do that. I suppose it would be possible, but I try to make my life easier. And then I'm just going to kind of go around the top here just a little bit as well. So I'll go ahead and get this wedge put together, and I'll be back to show you what to do with the 2 little cutouts. Now here's the bogey top put together to this point, and then these little cutouts are just going to fit on the base on the inside, but I'm going to just trim between a 1/16 of an 1/8 of an inch off, because we don't want them sticking out past the front edge here. So I'm just going to take some glue and put those little pieces in, and those will just help raise up the pipes a little bit so they're not sitting right on the base there. So I'll just let these 2 pieces set up for a few minutes, and then we'll be back to cover them with some decorative paper. So to cover these 2 bogey tops with paper, I'm going to first wrap the triangular ends and just come onto the top, and come around the ends just a little bit. And then I've cut a piece here that is 2.5 inches long by just a hair under 3.5 inches wide, and this will end up wrapping somewhat to the back here. You can see there's some overage, and around the front. So I'm going to do that for this solid one, and I'll put the 2 end pieces on this one with the cutouts, but I'll be back to show you how to deal with those cutouts. So here I have my ends covered and wrapped some, and you wouldn't be as chintzy as I was with my paper wrapped here. This is pretty much right on the edge, but I had a scrap that I was trying to use. And then here, this is my piece that I cut just shy of 3.5 inches wide and 2.5 inches this way. I scored it at 1/2 in from one edge and 3/8 from the other. And you can see I've got some good score tape on the back here. You don't have to have it completely covered, but you want good coverage on that because we'll be adding some elements on the front there, and it's always best to have real secure paper adhesion when you're doing that. And then I'll just go ahead and put those tabs down. I also did ink these white edges and cut in just a little angle on the two tabs here. So that will do it for the piece that's going to go on the front. And then for the piece that's going to go on the back, we need to cut some holes in our decorative paper to go around the openings here. But let's make our pipes so that we know how to cut these openings. So here I have a piece of this bird paper. I forget what it's called. It's the one I cut the element out of for one of the wheels. And this piece is just 6 inches. Check the note on the video, and it will tell you how long we will need to cut our pipes in order to fit. I'm just going to cut this in half for now, but like I said, look at the note and see how long you will need to, because I will have sized this to fit when I edit the video. So what we want to do is create a tube that is 1/2 inch in diameter, and I've put a line of score tape along one edge, and I've also darkened that edge as well. Now I have a circle template on here that has a 1/2 inch opening. If you don't have something like that, you'll need a 1/2 inch punch and just create a 1/2 inch opening, and this is lightweight chipboard, and a good punch will cut through the lightweight chipboard. Anyway, to make our pipe, you can use a dowel and form it around a dowel, or you can see I also have here, this is a piece of bubble tea straw, which is maybe just a hair underneath 1/2 inch, and you could also use that. So I'm just going to wrap this around my dowel here. Try to keep my ends pretty straight. Just kind of roll it back and forth a little bit and train it, and let go of the dowel out of there, but don't let go of the pressure on here, but let go enough so that you can release this score tape. Now you want to be careful that this score tape doesn't engage prematurely, but using either a hole like this or on your template, put the tube in there until it gets about in the middle, and then just kind of let it go. And if your score tape hasn't engaged yet, I have to let mine loose here a little bit, you'll be able to create that tube. And then just use your dowel on the inside, or something, if you had a little bit bigger dowel, it'd probably be better, something that you can use to burnish down that join. So just get that join burnished down. Alright, so, and we'll need 2 of these tubes. So then what's going to happen here is the tubes are going to fit inside of this area, but we need to cut the paper to fit around there. And what I've determined is that if you make an opening that is 1 inch from the top of a part of a punch circle to the other side of a punch circle, that will be the right amount of space in between there. Now the question is how far up from the top or the bottom to put that. So to make this template, what I did was I took a piece of scrap cardstock that is 3.5 inches wide. It can be, you know, any length that's longer, you know, that at least a couple inches in width. And then with your ruler, mark that center 1.5 inch spot. So just kind of like how we marked to cut the openings here. I'm marking 3/4 of an inch off of center and then 1/2 inch beyond that. And then I'll do the same thing down here. Connect my dots. And then somewhere, depending on how wide you've made your paper, I'm going to just start 1 inch from one of, or just about this much from one of the ends. And I'm just going to mark a rectangle so that this is 1 inch, and then of course it's the 1/2 inch wide. So then I'll take my punch and make the punches inside of there. I'm just lining up the edge of the punch with those lines, and then I can connect them with my craft knife. Now if your punch doesn't have a long enough reach, you can take the template or this thing that you've punched with your punch and line it up on both ends, and then just cut around that with a craft knife. So there, I have my 2 1-inch holes. Now the only thing is to decide where to put that. And so if I line it up here on my front, I can use my little tube that I've made. And basically the bottom of the hole wants to be even with the front of that piece of chipboard there. And then you can see coming up here and just kind of make a crease along the top, and that'll give you how far they need to be from the top. And we know if we made those scores at 1/2 inch and 3/8 that this is 1 5/8 inch across. So if I come down here and mark 1 5/8, I can cut this off, and then cut this off at the 1 5/8. Now if we hold this up on here to test it one more time, we can see that will work good for our paper. Covers up the edges there of the holes. So then I can just take this template. Mine is a little bit not quite wide enough here, but I can line it up here, get it centered, and then mark and cut those 2 holes. So that's how to mark the decorative paper for the pipes. So I'll get that marked and attached here, and then I'll be back. I wanted to say that before attaching, I've gone ahead and inked around the inside of the holes, and I also did blacken with my marker just on these little pieces that we put in there. This is going to be way underneath the boiler, so that probably won't show at all, but I just like to take a moment and do those kinds of things. Now I'm going to, when I join this, go ahead and put it on at the base first, so then I can see that it's lining up nicely with the bottom edge of that chipboard, and then go ahead and wrap it to the top. So then this will be our placement. If over here to my right is the front of the locomotive, this part goes right underneath the boiler and supports the boiler, and then we'll make some ends for the pipes, and this will stick they will attach to the front of the back wheelbase. And then we want to make some little rings that will hold the pipes on the end that connects them to the back wheelbase. So here I've already cut out several pieces. This is out of pattern paper, and these two are out of cardstock. They all have score tape on the back, and what I did was I punched a 1/2 inch hole in the center and a 3/4 inch hole around. And then from the cutting guide, it tells us that we need a strip that is 1 inch by 8 inches, and from this we're going to cut 4 rings like this. I backed this with some stick-it paper just because, especially my 3/4 inch punch, it struggles a little bit to get through this thin chipboard. The 1/2 inch works pretty well. This 3/4 inch one that I have struggles a little bit, so I didn't want to put score tape on here to make it even more difficult for it. So what I do is I mark space out here 8 1/2 inch rings and punch them first, and then I center those holes and punch the 3/4 inch ring. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll be back. So now that I have all my parts cut out, it's a matter of stacking them up, and here I've already stacked up the decorative paper and the 4 plain chipboard circles, and then I've taken my black marker and gone around the inside and also the outside. You can do the outside after you attach the black circle, but you can't really get to the inside after the black circle's been attached. So I'll just remove the stick-it from this last little chipboard circle and put that on. And of course we've got the score tape on the back that will allow us to attach it to the back wheelbase. And then we've got a nice little deep ring that can hold the end of the pipe at the back wheelbase part. So I'll complete the assembly of this other side and then just put these 2 little units aside. I've decided to add some trim onto this front support, and I'm planning to do it along the top diagonal edge, then come straight across on the top. This is only going to be on the top, and continue around the top of the side, and then finally on the back repeat that on this angle and this flat piece too. Now I have the front wedge here because you can see that it will come up into this area that I'm going to put trim on. So I want to make sure that when I choose how to cut this trim that I don't end up with one of my little gold buttons behind where this box will come. So I'm just going to cut that trim and apply that, and then I'll be back. So now I have my trim added. You can see it comes down here, goes around the sides, and then comes back up on the back. And now I'm ready to attach the 2 wedge pieces to the curved piece. I'm using a combination of score tape, and I'll also put some wet glue on here. And I'm going to use the lines on my craft mat to my advantage. I can see through this piece of deli paper to where the lines are, and I'll just get the central support piece centered on some of these lines, and then I can push this piece into place and use the other lines to make sure that it gets perfectly centered. And then I'll repeat that on the back. I've just temporarily removed the pipes while I'm doing this process. Make sure that everything is staying flat against your work surface so that we'll end up with a flat unit to attach to the bogey base. So I have my wet glue attached here. I have my main piece aligned, and then I can use my lines, and I'm just going to slide that into position and then hold it firmly until this side sets up. And now my upper assembly has dried, and I've prepped it with a couple pieces of score tape. I'm again going to use a combination of score tape and wet glue to attach this piece to the bogey base. When I put that on there, I'll make sure that I've got the front in the front. So the front has the little bumper on it on the bogey base, and the back of the upper assembly has the pipe places. I'll make sure I get it centered, of course, every which way, and then let that set up firmly to dry, and then I'll just put this aside.